Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Happy to have you here with us. Lou, how are you?
I'm doing very well, and just looking for this chapter so far is fascinating me so much. I'm just looking forward to each episode.
Thank you. So, we're going to be talking about verse 3, chapter 15 here about the upside down tree. I hope you have listened to the previous episodes. If you haven't, please go back to verse 1 so you understand what we're talking about. This is the upside down tree. Its form is not perceived here as such. Neither its end, nor its origin, nor any clear foundation of this tree. Having cut asunder this firmly rooted Ashwatha giant fig tree with the strong axe of non attachment. That's the verse. So basically, he's saying one thing is that this tree is not perceived. This Brahman is not perceived. Brahman is such, you know neither its end, where does it end? Where does Brahman end? Where does Brahman begin? Nor its clear foundation. To a certain extent, he's saying that the tree is also like that. You don't know because the tree is before your father was born, before your grandfather was born. They said, this Ashwatha tree has been here forever. So it's almost as if, not quite, that the tree is there without you knowing the beginning of the tree, nor its end, nor its foundation. So the analogy he's making is that Brahman, we don't know where Brahman started or where it'll end, and we don't know its clear foundation. We think the same of the world. We go back and we say, scientists say, go back so many million years when the great bang took place, the Big Bang took place, the earth began over there. But we don't really know that. As you look at it, there's many questions that scientists come up with. And some are actually saying that the world exists because of consciousness. That's a whole other theory that we too heavy to get into right now. But the world, the earth, the universe appears as if it has no beginning, no end. But we do know that there will come an end, that the whole universe goes back into itself as it came out the first time. So there's an end. But that's matter. We're talking about the universe, the earth, us as human beings. There's an end. Matter has an end, but Brahman has no end. But he's saying, cut asunder the tree. That means anything that's below the ground, which is Brahman, the roots, and vasanas can't be cut. Vasanas and Brahman also have both of them have no beginning, no end, no foundation, no clear. But the tree is the world, actions, desires, sense objects. He said, cut asunder with the strong axe of non attachment. So, non attachment is something that we've heard before in the scriptures and we've talked about it. But to mention again, we're going to talk about what non attachment really means. When you say non attachment, you say, oh, I can't do, how can I not be attached to my children, my grandchildren, my spouse, my fortune, my money, my fame, my power? All of these things we are attached to it. Give it up? Are you kidding? So, those are the things we'll talk about. So, let's talk first about Vairagya and Viveka. Now, these are two Sanskrit words that don't really have a translation in English. Viveka means discrimination, broadly speaking. Vivek means to be able to discriminate between this and that, to be able to discern this and that. I can't tell you more than this and that because they're different. So you have to be able to discriminate between A and B, good and bad, spicy, not spicy, beautiful, right, beautiful, that kind of stuff. That's called Viveka, discrimination. That then leads to a Vairagya, which is a dispassion, a detachment, a non-attachment. So discrimination leads to detachment or non-attachment. Viveka leads to Vairagya. We can do a whole episode on Viveka and Vairagya, maybe more than one episode. It's pretty deep, this whole concept of Viveka and Vairagya, discrimination and detachment. So, if you go to your favorite restaurant, right? I keep last episode I was talking about Chinese food all the time, Chinese restaurants, and let's say you by some mistake instead of going to the restroom, you walked into the kitchen and you saw what that kitchen was like, right? Most kitchens in restaurants,
Right.
if you see it and you see the sweaty guys and how, I don't even want to go into the description, you'll say, I don't want to eat this. I don't want to eat this anymore. Why? Because of the viveka. The discrimination now comes in, and you say, this is what he gives me when he gives it to me on a plate, and this is the area where it's manufactured. This is what I'm eating. I don't feel like eating it. That detachment, that non attachment comes almost automatically when you have that viveka, that discrimination. Same
I'm
thing.
reminded of the old phrase that you don't want to know how the sausage is made.
Good.
Yeah.
You don't want to know how the sausage is made. When you see the discrimination, somebody that you say, oh, I can't wait to be married to this person, and you get married and you start to find faults which you didn't realize the person had until you got married. Now you're in close proximity, you see that person, like you went into the Chinese restaurant and you went into the kitchen and you start, and I don't mean to say Chinese restaurant, any restaurant. You go into the kitchen and you look and you say, this is too close for me. You start to be able to viveka, you start to be able to discriminate between good and bad over there. So same thing happens when you get to know a boss or a spouse or a good person that you say, he's my friend. You start to be able to see flaws, and then you're able to detach from that. So viveka leads to vairagya. And what the scripture says, one way to do this about your attachment to the world is through viveka. That's why this whole soliloquy that I was going through, this whole description. Why? Because with knowledge comes the ability to do detachment or non-attachment, to do vairagya. That viveka comes with knowledge. And that's what you're doing right now. You're getting knowledge. As you get knowledge, you're able to further and further discriminate and see the various good things and bad things about these things that you're attached to. Now, non-attachment does not mean give up everything. That would be too frustrating. Nobody, not the scriptures, anybody recommends it. You'll be frustrated. You cannot force it. You cannot say, I'm going to give up everything. Although Buddha started to, Buddha went and said, I'm not eating any food, and he almost died. And then people around him in the forest said, listen, you can't do it this way. You got to go. You need your body. You can't die like this. You'll die. And so they said, you have to eat. You can't be dying for food, literally or otherwise. You can't just be craving for food all the time. That's not good. But you need food. So for us to say non-attachment doesn't mean give up everything. You'll be frustrated. You cannot force it. But you do have to use discipline. You can't be indulging yourself all the time. You must indulge yourself occasionally. Otherwise, you get frustrated. Keep in mind that certain, how should I say this? Certain dictates are that you're not going to indulge in anything physical, whatever. Okay, you can use your imagination.
Right.
What happens then is that desire, because it's suppressed so much, the frustration comes out in other ways. The mind says, okay, I'm not allowed to indulge my desire in this way, so I'm going to indulge it in that way. It still comes out, it still gets satisfied. So putting a complete end to that relief that the desire wants is not a good idea, because it'll come out and then you'll be stuck expressing your desire, your wishes in a different way, which will get you in trouble. You're better off doing it, but in limited quantities, the first way. I hope I'm making myself clear to some of you or all of you. So don't indulge indiscriminately in whatever it is that your body wants. A body is, after all, just a body. That's the lowest form of what you are. The highest form is your Atman, then the intellect, then the mind, which has all emotions and wishes and desires, and the body is just the servant of these three
Hmm.
things. The body has demands. Body says, I need to breathe. You can't stop that from breathing. The body says, I need to excrete. You can't stop the excretion. It has to excrete. Body says, I need to fulfill my appetites, various appetites. You can't say you're not going to, but you can say you will do this in with discrimination, with viveka and vairagya, little bit of it at a time. Don't indulge indiscriminately, control, lessen, and a little bit at a time. That allows you to do that viveka, discrimination, allows you to do vairagya, detach and non-attach. How do you detach? You detach by attaching yourself to a higher cause. The higher you go, the lesser desire you have for the lower. So we've given this example many times that when I was a young boy, I loved comic books and marbles and bicycle and various things. And
Right.
as you get older, you say those things don't matter as much anymore. Why? Because you've gotten attached to something higher. So the lower drops off. Here, once you realize the beauty of these scriptures, this knowledge, just the ability to understand this gives you the appetite to say, I enjoy this so much, that doesn't mean anything to me. So, two examples. One is that of a multi billionaire, right? Jeff Bezos, owner of Amazon. Is he the richest man in the world? Lou, I don't know.
I think, yeah. If not, he can certainly get in the club.
Yeah, get in the club.
Yeah.
So, very, very rich man. You go to him with your idea of a business and you say, you know what, if you invest $5,000, you're going to make $500 every week for the rest of the year. And to you, that's a great thing. You say, you know what, 10% return times 52, 520% return per year.
Yeah.
How could I go wrong? But to him, he says, so what? I put $5,000, it's going to give me $500 a week. I make whatever he makes every minute with every dollar that his stock goes up.
Right.
So for him, that means nothing. So there's the vairagya and the viveka. The viveka is the knowledge to say, this means nothing to me. To him, to Jeff Bezos, to a rich billionaire, it doesn't mean anything because he has so much more. But to an educated, wise person who knows these scriptures, the same thing happens. As you get a value for the higher, the lower things, fame, money, power, beauty, who invited me to which party, who didn't invite me, who insulted me, who said what to me, who praised me, all of these things start to mean very little. So that's one way of the detachment that you need. The second example is you go to some jungle where the person has never seen a city, never seen a TV or knows anything. All he knows is his little village over there in the jungle that has never been outside it. And you go to him and you say, you know what? I have certificates of the Amazon. I have certificates of share certificates of Microsoft, Apple, and these are worth billions of dollars. Here, I'll give these to you. And he says, I don't want this. What is this, paper? I don't need anything like this. He has no interest in it. But
Right.
you're carting a cow along and you say, would you like this cow? And he says yes. He's thrilled. To have a cow for him is everything. To you, you don't recognize that these shares of Amazon, Microsoft, Apple are worth so much, and he's taking the cow. But again, for most of us, to a self realized or spiritual person, what we do in how we relate to the objects of the world is the same way. Is the same way. what we're exchanging, I mean, we may be taking many coins which are of copper and trading them in for one coin of silver, and trading many coins of silver for one coin of gold, but it's still very petty to the person, just like the person offering a villager a cow versus share certificates.
Right.
So this knowledge allows you to get past your ignorance and your limited knowledge. And this tree, this upside down tree, represents the world, us, our actions, and so on. So then comes this whole concept of vasanas. The main root of this upside down tree is Brahman. Brahman created everything, but when this energy, this Atman of ours, doesn't recognize Brahman, I don't recognize Brahman, that misapprehension, non recognition of Brahman, recognizes the forms of Brahman in a different way. We recognize it as desires, as thoughts, as actions. We recognize it as the world. Though that is what a vasana is. So those thoughts, desires, and actions create desire. You have a thought for something, you create a desire. You create desire means you create sorrow and you create pleasure. You may find that surprising that I'm saying that. How does creating a desire create sorrow and pleasure? Yeah, I'll talk to you about it. I'll mention this. Sense objects don't have pleasure or displeasure or sorrow in themselves. The most beautiful woman that a man could want does not have pleasure or sorrow in her. It is the desire that the man has that projects onto this beautiful person that pleasure or sorrow, so that you say, if my desire is satisfied, I'll be happy. Remember, we talked about that.
Yes.
If my desire is not satisfied, I'll be sorrowful, I'll be unhappy. So one person likes something, the other person dislikes that same thing. The
Yep.
same woman that one man finds beautiful, another man could say, I have no desire for this woman. In fact, I have no desire for any woman. So that has possible. You
Hmm.
would say, well, how can you not find this woman so beautiful? How can you not desire her? To him, truly, he's not lying when he says he has not 1 ounce of any desire for that woman. Same thing goes for cigarettes or a cigar or a pipe. You find it disgusting. Other people love it. Alcohol, food, any pleasure sense object you can think of, the same thing applies. So one person loves it and another person desires it. You have projected your desire onto that object. Bear with me, this is important. The desire for that object puts the pleasure or the sorrow in there. Therefore, you crave it. You crave it because you want that pleasure. It's not the object. It's not the object, not
Right.
the person, not the woman, not the cigarette, not the pipe, not the food, not the smell, not the power, not the pleasure, not the money. It is your craving for it that causes it. Sorrow and pleasure are both two sides of one coin. That coin is desire. Sorrow and pleasure are both sides of the same coin. If you are satisfied, your desire is satisfied, you have pleasure. Turn the coin over, your desire is not satisfied, you have displeasure or sorrow. Both are caused not by the object,
Right.
but by the desire. I hope that's clear.
Yes.
Now, if something happens, just as an example, to somebody else's child, do you feel as bad as if it happened to your own child? You feel bad, of course. You say, oh my goodness, he fell down, he got hurt. But imagine that it's your child that fell down.
Right.
You'll also be distressed, but I guarantee you, you'll be distressed at a higher quantity, higher level. Why? Do you have the same amount of sorrow as if something bad happens to somebody else's child versus if it happens to yours? Why? Because it is your desire. The child may be his child, my child, but your child is endowed with your desire.
Right.
Your child has your desire to say, I want him or her to be well, I want him to be beautiful, I want him to be grow taller, I want him to grow bigger, I want him to be famous, educated. All of these desires are completely onto that child. Therefore, something happens to that child, you feel far greater sorrow again than you would for somebody else. So bottom line is, where there is desire, there's pleasure. Where there is desire, there's also sorrow. If you therefore remove those desires, you remove, you're beyond the sorrow and you are beyond pleasure. Not that you don't have the pleasure is actually much greater because there's no desire to be fulfilled. And that, of course, is beyond most of us. But to get there, you have to eliminate your desire. So that was a long one. Sorry, Lou. I hope I'm
No,
not beyond the time.
no, it's good. That's important. And I love the example of actually detaching the pain or the pleasure from the object itself and understanding that you're creating this. We all lose sight of how much power we have to create our pleasure and create our pain and actually control our lives. We give up our control because we think it's all external. It's the object. That's why I want it. It's no, because it's you. It's because it's your desire. You're creating that desire.
And as I said before, that desire, that object then binds us. We feel that we cannot do without that object. Our happiness is bound to that object. Therefore, that object determines whether I'll be happy or not you.
And in the last episode, we talked about how you detach by finding a higher attachment. And part of the joy of those higher attachments are releasing you from the bond of those lower attachments where you're unhappy if you don't have this. Right. I
So,
mean, these lower desires can tend to create more displeasure because they don't please you as often. You're always searching for them. You're never satisfied. You just keep going.
so when I first heard this, friends, Lou, you have to go through these lectures, these verses, these teachings over and over again, because you'll see if you go back to these. This is what, our third episode of chapter 15.
I think so.
You
Yeah.
have to go back and see how much is packed into each verse, how much is packed into each of these episodes, because it's not me. I just took the verse and I presented to you, and believe me, I've only presented a small piece of each verse to you. But even this, if you write it down and you write, that's what Shravana and Manana is. You hear it, that's Shravana. Manana is reflection in your mind over and over again. You got to listen, write it down, look at it, break it down, and contemplate. Think about it, because believe me, there's a lot packed in here in each of these episodes, each of these verses.
And I
So,
think if you go back, you'll see those verses in the past with more discrimination, which is what we talked about in today's episode. So you have more ability to see it more clearly.
yes, thank you. And of course, any questions, feel free to ask. And if I get the question, I'll be happy to answer. You can go to Gita, Gita, memoirs, memoirs, of a psychiatrist at gmail.com, or on Facebook. You can just ask me a question and I will try my best to reply as soon as I see it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.